Outsiders. Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to woke identity politics, anti-Semitism on steroids, and political correctness gone mad, what showing unconditional support for Hamas is to not reading the fine print.
Doing a quick petition to help Hamas free Palestine. You're all in? All right. Oh yeah, you're in?
Easily.
I just have to read terms and conditions just so you know what you're signing.
Okay.
By supporting Hamas freeing Palestine, you agree to the following. You agree that every Jew, Christian, and non-Muslim in the world must be slaughtered.
I don't know about that one.
You endorse making homosexuality punishable by jail or death.
What? Oh no, that I don't.
You don't agree with that?
Yes, it would appear all those useful idiots chanting queers for Palestine and from the river to the sea don't actually have the faintest idea what it all actually means.
You believe Iran should use Palestinians as puppets to spread radical jihad and destroy the West? No?
No.
I'm glad I read the terms and agreements. You support strict Sharia law, which bans women from showing their knees, hair, playing sports in public, not being able to travel without a man's permission.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Not interested? Oh, okay. You want a terrorist group that beheads babies and rapes girls to replace only democracy in the Middle East?
Not sure that's something to support.
Yes, it would appear that much like signing a dodgy prenup or a 99-year lease or any number of other things, well, you don't want to sign up to Hamas unless you've actually read the fine print.
If I sign, I agree with this.
Yes.
Maybe no.
No? Okay.
Oh, no. Thank you.
No.
I don't support any of these two things that you just read to me, so
Okay.
I won't be able to sign this now.
That's fair. No, thanks for not signing.
And you do not need to have read the fine print to know that we've got a huge show coming up for you today. You do not want to miss 1 second of it. Do not move from your seat for the next 2 hours unless it's to grab a strong one from the Nespresso machine. But first, it's Outsiders News. So, James, fascinating news. Who'd have thought it? The blue-collar battlers are deserting Albo and the Labour Party. Where have I heard that? Oh, only on this show for about the past 18 months. But yes, finally the pollsters have caught up what we've been telling you all along, James.
Yes, that's right. Another 4-point drop for Labour, according to the latest Redbridge poll, which just dropped today. Some fascinating bits and pieces out of this. Number one, it suggests that Albanese, as we have said on this program for the last year and a half, had spent all his time on The Voice, and he has nothing left in the tank to fall back on, especially with his working class constituencies. It has found that especially in those supposedly safe Labour outer suburban seats, Western Sydney, Western Melbourne, he's really on the nose, and particularly among working class voters, voters with a TAFE education, the non-basically teals, he's really, really struggling. And the thing is, we knew this all along because, of course, he spent all his time virtue signaling on The Voice, spending all his time hanging out with Alan Joyce and all the corporates and not spending any time out there with the people who are, of course, the traditional Labour voters. And now, Rita and Rowan, he's got cost of living going through the roof. His energy plan has been a disaster. Renewables are cheaper, and yet our power bills keep going up. And everybody's looking down the barrel of potentially yet another interest rate rise on Tuesday, Melbourne Cup Day. He is in a fair bit of trouble, Rita.
Well, yeah, it's not surprising, and this is an opportunity for the coalition. It's an opportunity. We've been telling them for some time that their future isn't in those inner city, affluent, former blue ribbon Liberal seats. They're gone. That's a trend that's bigger than Australia. You've seen that trend in the UK, in the US. Those affluent seats in the inner city are leaning increasingly left, whether it's Greens, Labor or the Teals in Australia. So those suburbs, regional areas, aspirational Australians, working class Australians who've traditionally leaned towards Labor, they're ripe for the picking. Labor has deserted those people, not just Albanese in the last 18 months with his voice obsession and gallivanting around the world, 20 trips in a short period of time. No. This is an opportunity that the coalition needs to seize and recognise. Those are your Australians who are unrepresented really at the moment. Both sides have got this
Well,
focus
this is the point.
on
No.
the inner city.
Exactly. Well, this is the problem. This was the huge mistake Morrison and Turnbull made. If you remember, this is a long-term historical trend.
Yes.
We had Howard's battlers, we had Tony's tradies, and now I'm predicting Pete's plumbers will win the next election for the coalition. Pete's plumbers are coming to put the coalition back in power next year. Good riddance. Good riddance to Albo and Penny Wong and Tony Burke. You didn't mention, Rita and James, Tony Burke's insidious loophole regulations, which are destroying jobs, making life a nightmare for small business people, for people trying to get on, build up their own business, open their own cafe, whatever it might be. Labor's red tape, Labor's green tape, Labor's IR tape is destroying productivity in this country. Pete's plumbers will put the coalition back in power next year. You've heard it here first.
And Rowan, there's another issue, too, that's simmering underneath all of that there. You said the magic word productivity. And when we talk about productivity, we also need to talk about another issue that is really hitting the western suburbs, the working class suburbs very hard, and that is immigration. And this, I predict, is the sleeper
100%.
issue, guys,
100%.
that is going to, if Peter Dutton can work this properly, he's going to bring together two groups of people. Number one, people out in western suburbs, electorates that are having more and more people dumped on them to increase the overall GDP, which goes to the big end of town, but doesn't make any life any better for them.
Makes it worse.
Also,
Yes.
younger voters who are getting screwed by the housing crisis, and you have all of these mid-wit, YIMBY housing economists out there saying, oh, we just need to build more houses for all the migrants, rather than saying, hey, why don't we pause this for a bit and let everybody catch up? This housing issue, this infrastructure issue, this migration issue is going to be huge for the coalition if they can thread the needle on it.
Well, the numbers coming in through, Rowan, are astonishing. We're talking about record numbers here. More than half a million a year. Those people need housing. We already have a housing shortage. We've got costs soaring. We don't have enough people working in the sector. We've got building companies going bust. The unions are running amok.
Building approvals are down.
Building approvals are down. The cost of building in this country and the red tape around it is ridiculous. It is so difficult. And yet we're bringing in more than 500,000.
Well, I've got the solution. I've got the solution.
Where are they living
well,
out?
I've got the solution, and the solution is a town on the Molonglo River called Canberra. Canberra could easily cope with 500,000 people because they have nice big houses there. I was born in one of them. I lived in one of them. Nice big houses there. Kevin Rudd lived in my bedroom. You'll remember that story, Rita. Plenty of room. That's where it all started, you bet. Plenty of room there in all those houses in Canberra. I think we could easily fit 500,000 people. Just everyone in Canberra takes one person into their spare bedroom and away you go. And we know from the Voice referendum that the people in Canberra are completely out of touch. The only place in Australia that voted yes to the referendum. Well, I think sharing and getting in touch with real people, not the Canberra bubble, would do an awful, go a long way to educating those public servants about real life in the western suburbs.
And who wouldn't want to be there, for the ACT party lifestyle? But but no, seriously, I do think that migration is going to be the sleeper issue because it's going to hit, I 100%. think, the younger voters who have been screwed out of housing by this. Yes, Rita.
But those younger voters are the ones who are voting for Labor and the Greens. Are they going to recognise that the policies they're supporting are a big part of the reason why they can't afford to buy a house, why their roads are clogged, why hospital waiting lists are going to look the way they are.
Because Rita, I'm sorry, the coalition has been just as bad on this. Under Scott Morrison, the coalition was all about big Australia. They were basically letting all the big business chambers set the migration rate. And, it's the business lobby and also the universities lobby, which has this huge number of, it's hundreds of thousands of people coming into these student visas every year, and a lot of them are from these sort of training colleges, and we know what that means. It's not, this is not really actually adding to the skill set of Australia. It's not adding to the economy of Australia. It's not adding to the productivity of Australia. And it is only when we get productivity up that that inflation will come down, that real wages will rise, and life will get better for us. We did it under the Howard, Hawke, and Keating eras when we made regulation less, we improved the economy. This government, Albanese, is about turning it back to the pre-reform era. That's why they're having the business changes. That's why they're changing things to make unions more powerful. And that's why the economy is becoming more corporatist every day.
Everything they're doing is making the economy worse, and we're seeing it. Kick Labor out, get rid of them. One of the arguments often put is that, oh, no, the bedwetters and the Libs, we can't ignore the teal seats because, if we lose the teal seats, well, you lost the teal seats. That didn't work out. They're gone. But here's the thing. There is a pathway back to win back some of those teal seats, and that is the overt support for pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel politics that we've seen from the teals. Now, I would ask those members of large Jewish communities in all those teal seats, are you now really pleased that you made that decision? We've seen the principal of a Melbourne Jewish school has written a blistering letter to independent Kooyong MP Monique Ryan, accusing her of unacceptable bias in selectively expressing outrage at the death of children in Gaza rather than the deaths of the 400 Israelis at the hands of Hamas in that grotesque pogrom we saw. We also saw other teal members clearly favouring the non-Israeli side of issues in this, and that's a question that those Jewish communities in those electorates need to ask themselves. Did you make the right choice? Clearly you didn't.
Two of them sided with Adam Bant and his motion to... that was a bipartisan motion, by the way, of declaring support for Israel and its right to defend itself. And we had, the Tinks and Scamps? That were the two...
I believe so, dissidents, what they wanted to do is they wanted to change the second paragraph of the resolution and to condemn Israel as well. And that didn't play well. But also, just one more point on those seats, there's going to be a redistribution of seats, in New South Wales this year. The seats of North Sydney and Bradfield may very well be merged. They're going to lose a teal seat, so that also changes the calculus as well.
Really? Yeah. Right. Interesting. Now, in the lead-up to last month's unsuccessful Voice to Parliament referendum, Qantas spent, wait for it, $370,000 on its support for the Yes campaign. The funds went to campaign insignia on 3 aircraft as well as flights for officials. Have they taken the Yes thing off the airplanes? You two fly a lot of weeks.
Well,
are they there? Did they scrub them off? Did they leave them there?
Well, it wasn't on all their planes. It was only, but they are persisting with their endless, unnecessary, often incoherent acknowledgement of country announcements every time you take off from your own city and land in your own country, and then you get welcomed to your own country with some acknowledgement that a flight attendant is obliged to read, and they are obliged. It's not an option that the staff have. It's part of their checklist and they have to do it. So don't blame them. This is something that Qantas is
Well, I think there should be an option on the Qantas ticket. You can opt for carbon credits. There should be, do I want to hear the welcome to country or not? No, thank you. Big NO. And you'd get, and then Qantas can go, you know what, we don't need to do this anymore.
We're talking before about immigration policy and Big Australia and how both major parties have really been on that Big Australia bandwagon. Why don't we, at every election, have a referendum question? Not a referendum, because it's not a constitutional issue, but a question that is a policy question that everyone can give a yes or no answer to.
Love it.
And that is something you can do with it, because I think if you did that with immigration numbers, you would see something like 8%.
That's exactly why you will never, ever see that question asked on the ballot, because both the Coalition and Labor are completely in the tank for big business, big developers, and they need and want that bigger population. They have no concern about what that actually means to people on the ground.
Living standards are not a concern to them, because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. I know a lot of people are concerned about the demographic makeup of the country, whether people are properly assimilating, and we're going to talk about that later. But just the question of living standards, when you're putting this stress on the infrastructure, the infrastructure is not keeping up,
exactly.
The roads aren't keeping up.
The roads aren't keeping up. The hospitals aren't keeping up. The schools aren't keeping up. And, I'll tell you what, if you look at our GDP from a per capita basis, so cut up the pie,
Down.
it has been down for the last 2 quarters. That means that on a per person basis, we are in recession.
Absolutely. Now, ABC management, this made me laugh last week when I read this. ABC management is concerned it does not have a diverse enough workforce.
Oh, really,
And they said action must be
Fantastic.
taken to ensure it
More
reflects
churchgoers?
modern Australia and our continent and its staff. Now, and
More
in our content,
conservative
sorry,
Persians?
and staff. Yes, so we need more conservatives. So my financial review column, which I know you read, James, thank you, on the weekend.
I only
said
read the News Corp press.
I know. There you go. Look, the point is, the ABC is lacking diversity in its content and in its staff, and that lack of diversity is called conservative thought. That's what they are lacking. Mainstream Australia. They supported yes for the vote, like Canberra. They were on the wrong side of mainstream Australia, Rita.
Oh, not just on the wrong side. If you actually watched some of their current affairs programs throughout that debate, I'm talking about the 7:30 report.
It wasn't a debate on the ABC.
There was no debate. It was just yes, 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 yes. And if you were a no, it was presented as some sort of a sinister, what is wrong with you? What can we do about this terrible misinformation and hate? So they were so removed from mainstream popular opinion there. But this is the issue on every issue. Whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about...
Well, let me interrupt you there because talk about Israel-Palestine. Here's BTN. This is Behind the News. This is the propaganda arm of the ABC, which goes into every school in this nation. Look how they are teaching your kids about what the Palestine-Israel conflict is all about. Have a listen.
The Australian government has provided $25 million to help the humanitarian effort in Gaza.
We are particularly concerned for those who are suffering in Gaza, so we are committed to providing assistance to them through international agencies such as the UN and the Red Cross.
After lots of international pressure, Israel recently allowed some supplies to enter Gaza through its border with Egypt. But many say it's nowhere near enough to help everyone.
The aid that's coming in right now is not of the scale that we need to serve the population.
We had to reduce the ration of food that we were providing per person to make sure that it's stretching out to as many people.
UN agencies have been calling for a ceasefire.
Oh, geez.
James?
What did I just watch here?
Yep, that's what your kids are watching at school,
Was this translated from Al Jazeera?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
this is the worst thing I've seen. This is what they're propagandizing kids. And you see what they're doing. It's Hamas are the victims, the terrible Israelis, the poor
Israelis are blocking
they're starving the poor children. No mention. I mean, maybe they did something else somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe they did, but I rather doubt it. On, on the 200 plus Israelis who are being held in the tunnels that Hamas took all of the aid money to build, that they use civilians
and
as
they
human
call for a
shields. Ceasefire, Rita.
This nonsense that they are feeding our kids are being forced to watch this in schools. I mean, it's the indoctrination is absolutely off the scale. But it's not just on international issues, it's on everything. Race relations, climate change, national politics, state politics. It is there. It's unrelenting. We pay for it more than $1 billion a year.
Let's cut to the chase. You don't need to be more diverse, ABC. You need to be defunded and privatised and sold off on a subscription model.
I got an idea.
And we'll get back to you so quickly.
Idea. There's a great big, huge $1 billion complex in Ultimo in the inner city. Why don't we solve the housing crisis by turning the ABC headquarters into social housing?
Perfect. Now, it's not just here in Australia that we've seen a frightening response on the streets to that October 7th pogrom, those terrorist attacks on Israel, around the world as well. Multiple people were arrested last night in London when hundreds gathered at King's Cross Station and afterwards blocked Oxford Street, rallying for a ceasefire in Gaza. Joining us now from London, writer and great friend of this show, Esther Kraku. Esther, great to see you as always. It's what's happening in London. I mean, the footage we're seeing, it looks like an army of occupation has taken over.
I mean, unfortunately, like every movement, there will always be sort of people that really have no place, even engaging in intellectual discussion, suddenly taking over the conversation. So what we have seen in London is, these massive protests that, on the face of it, the many are advocating for a two-state solution and the pro-Palestine and, trying to highlight the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza. And then you have literally people shouting jihad in the streets and death to Jews and all these horrific statements that you wouldn't think you would even hear in a civilized country. But for some reason, the worst of our society have crawled out of the woodworks and have made their voices known. I was saying to a friend of mine, I actually had my best friend called me from a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv last year, and for her to know that the country that she grew up in, there are people that have no shame in shouting death to Jews, it's actually horrifying. Suella Braverman has called for the police to deal with these people, but I actually, I'm a free speech absolutist almost in the sense that I think these people should be allowed to speak because we need to know the kinds of views that the people that we live amongst have. Now, obviously, this does take away from the complexity of the issue and from the cause already. Baroness Sayeeda Vardi, who is a conservative peer, has highlighted, her concerns about the humanitarian issue and the nature of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And unfortunately, more sensible, nuanced voices have been drowned out because you have these hate-filled individuals that are marching on the streets of London. And would you believe that these people are planning a protest on Remembrance Sunday? I mean, it really just there's no worse way to desecrate the tombs of the people that actually gave them the freedom to even protest in the streets in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
By tarnishing this really remarkable day with this stunt. It really, at this point, I don't think it has anything to do with the Palestinians. I think it's just this ludicrous publicity stunt, and I find it extremely disheartening.
Well, just on that Remembrance Day protest, they're talking about a 1 million man march. And I know this has already upset so many people in the UK, and there's talks about a counter-protest, people showing up and making sure Remembrance Day is not going to be interrupted or wrecked with these protests. Can you tell us about that? There was even calls for military intervention from one MP.
Yes. So, I mean, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, have been very clear that they do not believe this should go ahead. I think anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that this is a terrible, terrible idea. I mean, I can't describe to you how I'm basically at a loss for words that these people really think Remembrance Sunday is the best way to do this. And again, more moderate voices, more sensible voices, the kind of voices that you want to hear on both sides of the debate are being drowned out. I mean, it's you will almost forget that 1,400 Israelis were butchered and murdered on October 7th, given the way the discourse has gone over the last 2 weeks, because you have these extreme voices that have no shame in shouting their hate on the streets of London. And it's really quite unfortunate. Look, I've been very open and I've been very vocal about my support for a two-state solution and highlighting the humanitarian issue in Palestine. But really, I am British, I live in Britain, and I don't think that anybody who lives in this country, who lives in and who values the values of this country can actually defend going onto the streets of London and shouting these sorts of hate-filled chants. I mean, it's genuinely just horrifying, and I really can't believe what I'm seeing. And I mentioned on the Bolt report last week that actually there was a man in the UK that was discovered to have been head of Hamas's terrorist operation in the West Bank, who got British citizenship in 2002 on a relative's passport, and is living in a council house in Barnet, which has the largest Jewish community in this country, on a 50% discount. Most people can't even get on the housing ladder. This man is living in a council house on a 50% discount at the expense of the taxpayer. And really, this is the depth of the issue that we're facing.
So, Esther, then, I mean, there's a couple of sort of issues that this brings up here. Number one, you've got these huge demonstrations of people who really do appear to be, yes, there are many who want a two-state solution or, better treatment for Palestinians or some such, but clearly, there's also a large number of people who really do represent a pro-Hamas fifth column, not just in Britain, but in other European countries. I saw footage before we came on air of pro-Hizb ut-Tahrir rallies in Germany. So this is a huge problem. And yet the Metropolitan Police, I have seen, have been going after people for putting up British flags, the Union Jack. Why are the police, A, not doing more to shut down these people who are And I'm a free speech absolutist, except for, supporting Hizb ut-Tahrir and, Hamas and groups like that. And also, is Britain going to do, so where's the Metropolitan Police, for one thing? But number two, is Britain going to go down the same road that countries like France and some Scandinavian countries are talking about, which is actively deporting people who are not citizens, who are espousing extremist pro-Hamas, pro-Hizb ut-Tahrir views?
Well, on the deporting people that are clearly hate-filled and don't align with British values, I highly doubt that will happen. I mean, in the last few years alone, particularly since the rise of the migrant crossings over the Channel, reports have indicated that over 100,000 people are unaccounted for, which means over 100,000 people have basically disappeared into the interior of the country. We really don't honestly have a clue of the kinds of people that are in this country. Immigration has swelled to eye-watering heights, and we're now just getting to grips with the fact that actually not only is immigration very high, who are the people that are in this country and what values do they have, and is it aligned with Britain? And I would like to stop being called racist for highlighting that. On the police front, the police have been politicized and as a result demotivated for a very long time. These are the same police force that were bending the knee during the BLM riots and all of that. So they've found themselves in a pickle. Because they've politicized themselves, they now have to fall on one side of the issue or another. I think the fact that you're seeing posters of missing Jewish children and women torn down on the streets of London is generally just heartbreaking. I mean, I met a man a couple of weeks ago who was meant to pick up his mother from Heathrow Airport, and she's a Hamas hostage as we speak. This woman is in her 80s. And he was completely heartbroken. And this is the thing. One of the things he mentioned was the fallout from this and what's going to happen and the amount of chaos and violence and escalation. And it's so sad that all of these tragic things are happening when there's real grieving to be done. Ultimately, like I said, there are really negative aspects of British society crawling out of the woodwork that are taking advantage of this massive crisis, and it's horrifying to watch.
Now, Esther, on a slightly lighter note, but it's not actually, the Marks and Spencers do their Christmas ad, John Lewis do their Christmas ad. It's something everybody looks forward to in Britain each year. Marks and Spencers, M&S, have come up with this weird ad, which has also somehow managed to provoke ire and controversy because it looks like there's a burning Palestinian flag in the fireplace, which obviously there isn't, because the ad would have been filmed several weeks ago, and it's streamers or party hats or whatever. But have a look at this ad, and then I want to get your thoughts on what on earth is going on in this ad, Esther. So it's quite a long ad, but they seem to not want to do any of the normal Christmas things. They're rebelling against it. Is that the idea?
Yes. So Marks and Spencer was saying that they were trying to embody how different Christmas is for every person in this country, because God forbid on Christmas you mention anything to do with Christ or the Christian faith. And so they had to apologize for that, because again, in trying to please everyone, they've actually lost the spirit of Christmas. Christmas is a holiday rooted in the Christian faith. Britain is still a Christian country. I know that is quite a shocking revelation to many people, but unfortunately M&S didn't get the memo. On the point of sort of what looked like the burning Palestinian flag, again, I couldn't believe this was a source of controversy. It was just, these are the colors of Christmas, and they happen to be in the furnace. I think the greater outrage should be, why are things being set on fire in a Christmas ad? Where is Santa Claus and the cute family and candy canes and going to church on Sunday morning and all the cute normal things that you expect people to do on Christmas, instead of this effectively topsy-turvy way of approaching it, which now advertisers have become fond of, because everything must be inverted and diversified.
Exactly, and heaven forbid that Jesus Christ might actually appear in a Christmas ad, Esther. There you go. We won't be seeing that from M&S in a while. Thanks, Esther. Always great to chat to you. We'll see you soon. Thanks a lot. Coming up next, Nationals MP Keith Pitt on Chris Bowen's destructive green energy projects. Plus, they're crushing the skulls of koalas. I hate to say it here on Sunday morning, that this is what Labor are offering up. Plus, Rita's reality check in a tick. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the highest rating program on all of Sky News, Outsiders, led by your hosts, Rowan Rambunctious Dean, James Jitterbug Morrow, and I'm Rita Panahi. Coming up next, we'll be dissecting the Treasurer's speech on the need for more robust government intervention in the energy market. Get ready to be swindled, folks. Now, I'm about to bring you some disturbing content, including shocking statements from an Australian religious leader. So first, let's have a little frivolity and marvel at a new Halloween phenomenon. That's a big word. The Biden.
Mr. President, please. It's one step, Mr. President. Yes, good job, Mr. President. Yes, right here. No.
Yes, the cognitively challenged US president has inspired children, young and old, to produce content like this, and we thank them for it.
No, oh my God.
Good afternoon. It's evening, sir. How are you? Oh, no, do not smell me.
Don't smell me. And it wasn't just children enjoying Biden-inspired hijinks. Here are folks dressed up as Joe and Hunter Biden, complete with an improvised Women of the Night. Sure, the country is a giant mess, but at least the president is inspiring some comic relief. Now to more serious matters. We are seeing the mask slip from so many faces that preach tolerance, virtue, diversity and safe spaces, who call anyone who deviates from leftist ideology hateful, intolerant and dangerous, who say women standing up for their rights are fascists and Nazis, conservatives who believe in law and order and see Western civilization as a force of good that should be protected. Well, they're fascists and Nazis. Anyone who believes in biology and doesn't think there are 1,600 genders, Nazi. If you're pro-free speech, if you protested against the most illiberal, draconian COVID-era policies, then you're a Nazi and fascist. Pretty much everyone, other than the far left, is a Nazi, except actual fascists calling for the destruction of the only Jewish state. Those who say Israel cannot act to defend its citizens, even after the biggest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. Take note of what prominent people are saying, and also take note of those who are unusually quiet. Some of the loudest voices from the activist, media and celebrity class, who cannot wait to weigh in on any issue impacting minorities, are saying nothing. The slaughter of 1,400 Jews is somehow the only topic that they're silent on. The last month has opened the eyes of many, including many in the Jewish community, who saw certain leftist activists and virtue signallists as allies. They are nothing of the sort. And as Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them. And the anti-Israeli sentiment isn't just from the usual mob of green-haired, pronoun-obsessed, anti-West, anti-capitalist neo-Marxists that we see at every rally, whether it's Extinction Rebellion or Invasion Day. No, there is also an element that has been imported. We've imported ancient hatreds and tolerated those who have no interest in assimilation, who have no interest in embracing our values. Indeed, to the modern left, assimilation is a dirty word. In recent days, we've seen chants about genocide on subways in London and Paris.
Palestine will be free. There is only one solution. Intifada revolution.
They're chanting for Intifada revolution. Imagine being a Jew on that train and hearing that. We've seen similar chants on the streets of Canada, America, Australia. We've seen Jews monstered on university campuses. And if you think it'll stop a Jews, then think again. Here are folks being intimidated by these protesters for visiting a McDonald's. including a father carrying his young son there. That doesn't stop them. No, it's not just about Zionists or Jews. If you listen to the speeches at the Australian rallies, you'd hear again and again how they link the Palestinian cause to the supposed oppression of Aboriginals. The same familiar themes about colonialism, imperialism, stolen land, illegal settlements and genocide are repeated, with Israel and Australia condemned as brutal apartheid states that must be decolonised. Then there are the Islamic preachers like Nassim Abdi, who claims that the rape, torture and slaughter that occurred on October 7 wasn't as bad as being claimed. He claims it's, say, I don't know, some sort of a PR exercise, and in any case, these were illegal settlers and not innocent victims.
These were not innocent victims, as we mentioned. These were people on the borders. There were army soldiers. There were people who were infuriating the Palestinian people. There were people that were there to cause problems, to provoke, and to oppress by taking over their lands. There were people that made the choice to go back to Israel and to get citizenship there and to live there, knowing that it is illegal under international law. They know that, they did not care. So do not say they are innocent victims as if they had nothing.
The children slaughtered in their beds weren't innocent victims. The women raped, kidnapped, paraded around the streets weren't innocent victims. Well, this Australian preacher has a theory on that too.
Which women did you see on the news? Did you see the ugly ones? Did anyone see any ugly women on the news? Honest question. There was no ugly women on the news. It looked like, mashallah, Victoria's Secret supermodels, tabarakallah. This is human psychology. They put these women there for what reason? To show that we are beautiful women, we are free women. They've got them dressed in their skimpy clothing. We are just like you in the West. We enjoy the same freedoms, the same liberal understandings as you guys. Help us, be with us, we are one against these savages, against these beasts, against these inhumane people. You made the choice to live there. This is a consequence at the end, inshallah. But they put photos of them and they act as if it's nothing.
Nassim Abdi also preaches that the mass rape and torture that occurred on that horrific day has been exaggerated.
There's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of videos out there now. Which one of them showed rape? Which one of them showed torture to a person that was alive? Yes, 100% when a person was dead, yeah, we've seen them stepping on them, 100%. We've seen that. And that was decades and decades and decades and decades of anger.
I've seen videos of very much alive, very much conscious victims being tortured, an injured foreign worker lying helpless on the ground while savages use garden tools to decapitate him. I saw a little boy, no more than 8 or 9, being hit with a stick and tormented. The terrorists proudly shared these videos. I've spoken to journalists who sat through 43 minutes of this horrific cruelty. It happened, and there are still more than 200 hostages in Gaza suffering God knows what. And yet, at these mass rallies from London to New York to Sydney, we don't see chants about free the hostages. We don't see anti-Hamas banners, anti-Hezbollah, anti-Islamist tyrant chants. If you really want to free Palestine, then free it from the subhuman savagery of Hamas.
Excellent, Rita. Well done. And there was some footage that we were looking at earlier we decided not to show of a young woman being paraded through Gaza after having been raped, tortured and killed. It's too confronting, so we chose not to show it. Jim Chalmers has warned Australia cannot meet its net zero emissions targets without more robust green energy schemes from the government. Joining us to discuss this is Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Keith, great to see you as always. Great Aussie flag you've got there in the background. I don't know if Albo managed to take one with him to China or whatever, but I'm sure he managed to take all his other favourite flags with him. Keith, Jim Chalmers thinks we should need to go in harder on the green thing. How's the green thing working out for us?
Jimbonomics is at it again. We had the 5,000-word diatribe over Christmas. And now we see that the tens of billions of dollars worth of subsidies already provided for intermittent wind and solar. Well, apparently that's not enough. So, Jimbonomics, it's another hip pocket attack that is more money from the Australian taxpayer, that is higher electricity prices for the Australian consumer. And for my sins, as I said to Rita on Friday, I read through the speech, and it is all about returns for investment and ideological views and delivery for the Labor Party's view on everything. It's nothing about what people can afford to pay. It's not about power prices coming down or gas prices coming down or the Australian economy or ensuring our country is strong.
James.
And, you know, all of this they say is in service, Keith, of serving the environment, protecting the environment. We've got to go to net zero to protect the environment. Oh, God bless the environment. But you have uncovered some disturbing facts about what is going to happen on the road to this green energy utopia. Tell us about what you discovered about what's happening with some of these wind farms that are planned in places like Queensland in native koala habitat. What is going to happen to our poor beloved koalas who I seem to recall during the bushfires a couple of years ago, that image of a koala being fed water during the bushfires was used against Scott Morrison. Apparently koalas are a bit more expendable now. Tell us about it.
Well, you know, it's everything's about wind and solar and protecting koalas unless you're going to get rid of koalas. And I've got to give credit to Michelle Landry. She broke the story a couple of months ago. 1,450 hectares. I went and read the environmental management plan, and it literally says 1,450 hectares odd of koala habitat has to be destroyed in order to build the Clark Creek wind farm. So that is dozers knocking down trees, destroying habitat. They did a quick sample survey. They counted 17 of them, and that'll just be in one little part. So all projects are equal, except some are more equal than others. So if it's wind or solar, you can do whatever you like. But heaven help us if you want to put a dam in for water supply for towns or irrigation, or you want to grow food. Who'd have thought it? You can't do any of that. You can't have a coal mine or another resource product without doing a whole heap of other work. But if you're putting these up, that doesn't matter. You can do anything you like, including knocking them on the back of the head, apparently, if they get injured.
And sorry, Rita, just explain that. What is this about crushing the skulls of koalas or blunt trauma, or where did that come from?
Well, that is actually out of one of the control measures from a document for the Clark Creek wind farm that was provided to me. And that's what it says. If you have injured wildlife up to a medium size, reptiles and mammals, etc., a sharp blow to the back of the skull with a blunt instrument is the way to deal with them. So clearly they're expecting animals to be injured. And what else would you expect? If you're going to clear more than 1,400 hectares, that's over 3,000 acres. Right? Don't underestimate that this is a big chunk of land. Well, of course they'll be injured because you're knocking down their trees. So that's how they manage it. I just think, you know, the people of the city, the socialists, the rich socialists, well, where are you? You're not up there tying yourself to bulldozers on these types of projects.
Well, no, it's the only projects that just go ahead regardless of the damage. And yet we had on Friday the federal court order Santos to stop the Bureaucracy project, the gas project. They're just hours before work was about to commence. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my understanding for Santos work was about to recommence. They were already more than 50% through the projects, my understanding. It's a $5 or $6 billion investment. That means you get to keep the Darwin LNG plant alive for another 20 years and all the jobs that go with it and the export money into the Territory. And the Northern Territory actually needs that economic boost. It's even worse in the West. Scarborough's more than $15 billion. It's held up because of another appeal, both through the Environmental Defender's Office, funded by the Australian Labor Party through the budget of the federal government via taxpayers to shut down big projects that we need. But it's all right if you're going to put 800 tonne of concrete in a hole in the ground and a 200 metre plus wind turbine, that's fine. You can do whatever you want, knock down anything you like, kill any part of the local wildlife, that seems fine, as long as you're meeting the ideology and Mr Chalmers' dream team.
Well, at least, sorry, just quickly, James, at least they'll be consistent, because after killing all the koalas, they'll then go on to kill all the eagles and the birds that are flying around with the wind turbines. So at least they're consistent in destroying the planet. James.
Yeah, and Keith, I want to ask you, too, about the politics of all of this, because you've got a federal election probably in about 18 months, more or less. I note that Peter Dutton has been spending an awful lot of time on the north coast, central north coast of New South Wales, seats like Patterson, where people are very upset about offshore wind turbines. Yep. Now, how much of do you think that this issue is going to play in your favour, the net zero transition, from an environmental, not an economic point of view, one, and how can you then take this to the electorate if the coalition still has net zero on the books as a policy?
Well, this is one of the big differences between a nuclear power station and 1,000 wind turbines twice the height of the Sydney Harbour Bridge offshore Newcastle. Nuclear has a very small footprint. In fact, it doesn't take up much room at all. It runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for up to 100 years, would you believe? These things last for about 20 years. And in those seats like Patterson and around Newcastle and to the Hunter, who rely on coal jobs and the resources sector and the Newcastle port, well, guess what? They don't want them there. They don't like the idea, and I saw the protests up against PEP 11, something I was responsible for. I mean, the proposal there was actually just to continue the permit. It wasn't even an application for an exploration rig, and if there was, there'd be just one single exploration rig. These things are enormous, and you need over 1,000 of them to meet Mr Bowen's dream of 5,000 megawatts of offshore wind in that Hunter zone. The water gets deep really quick. It's super expensive. They're in the middle of the ocean. And won't someone just think of the whales? Won't anyone think of the whales?
The whales used to be the big thing of the left. Now, of course, the whales are all forgotten about. But well done to those brave people up in Port Stephens and Newcastle who are speaking up against these atrocities, these monstrosities. Keith Pitt, always great to chat to you. Thanks so much. Keith Pitt, Nationals MP there, does a brilliant job. Coming up, we've got Lefty Lunacy, we've got Wackademia, and we've got a special guest, Ronald Reagan, all in a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita Panahi, with James Morrow and myself, Rowan Dean. And thank you so much for watching Outsiders every Sunday morning and helping to keep us the #1 show on Sky News Australia. Heard the one about the kids, or the kid, selling kittens at a political fundraiser.
When the people came out from the fundraiser, he was holding up the kittens and he was saying, "Buy a Democrat kitten." Well, a couple of weeks later, the Republicans held a fundraiser in the same place. And when they came out, there was the same kid with the kittens. And he said, "Buy a Republican kitten." And one of the members of the press who'd seen him there 2 weeks before said, "Wait a minute, kid. You were selling these kittens the last time as Democrat kittens. How come the Republican kittens now?" Kid says, "Because now they got their eyes open."
No one tells them like Ronnie. It's a good one. It's a great one. Yeah. Now, Wackademia. OK, a Yale student was censored. James, why?
Oh, well, he she actually wrote an op-ed saying that, Hamas is in the wrong and accused the campus of horrifying anti-Semitism after she wrote a column that was basically defending the Israeli position on things and saying...
telling the truth.
Yeah. Which we do here every week, by the way. But they slammed her. And just by the way, it's just like, not one little one-off here. This sort of thing is happening at every major and minor university in the United States now. The amount of anti-Semitism on campuses is just unbelievable. We have had death threats called in against Jewish students at Cornell University. We spoke to a student on the U.S. Report last Friday night who talked all about, the atmosphere on that campus, which is just horrendous. And, we've seen footage of editors of the Harvard Law Review harassing Jewish students on campus at demonstrations. It's just shocking stuff, guys.
James, these are tomorrow's lawmakers, judges.
So-called elite.
It doesn't stop at the madness of academia and college campuses, and that's what we've been saying for some time now. It starts there, but it has now spread to the private sector. The reason they edited this article this woman had written was because they said she had included unsubstantiated claims of babies being beheaded, women being raped, and apparently that was not okay. Really, is there any doubt that women were raped? Is there any doubt that people
According to that preacher character you had on earlier, yes. But Rita, also, a great editorial, by the way, you had a clip there of a Harvard Law, an editor, so James is talking about what's happening at universities. This bloke is one of the editors of the Harvard Law Review, so think how influential he is and is going to be in the future. Here he is literally intimidating and bullying a Jewish kid on campus. So, James, that poor kid.
Well, yeah, so this is a Jewish kid on campus there. He's surrounded by students demonstrating with the keffiyeh, which is the that sort of Palestinian scarf, which is, everybody puts on to sort of play dress-up cosplay terrorist. And they're screaming at him, shame, shame. He tried to get out. They wouldn't let him. One of the people there was a editor of the Harvard Law Review. This is just, and so far Harvard hasn't said they're going to do anything to discipline this student.
Ivy League colleges are not safe places for Jews. Perhaps that extends beyond Ivy League colleges, but they're just not safe. That they are tolerating things that are absolutely indefensible. That's assault. What we saw there is assault. They were not just screaming shame into his face. They were physically stopping him from going where he wanted to go. They were blocking him. It was a physical action, not just screaming shame into his face.
Isn't it funny, Rita, that all of these campus universities that spent years saying, oh, words are violence, we must shut down anybody.
That's right.
It reveals that wokeness is all about power. It's not about power.
Marxism.
It's Marxist power.
Absolutely.
And they would do that to others. Don't think it stops with the Jews.
Of course not.
It starts with the Jews and ends with the Jews.
Don't go anywhere. Dr. David Adler is joining us in a second to discuss anti-Semitism and if Labor's policy is complicit with Hamas. Don't go away. In a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita, James, myself, Rowan, and in a tick we'll be talking to Dr. David Adler. But first up, the Canberra bureaucracy is totally out of control and is in urgent need of some serious pruning. The public service is an absolute disgrace, and the first order for an incoming coalition government, which we will be getting after the next election, is to clean out the swamp and to punt every single public servant on a salary of over $400K. Every single one of them. Starting with this bloke, who is Secretary of the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts, heaven help us, who had the temerity to complain that we, the public, through our senators, actually want to know what they are doing with our money. My thanks to Liberal Senator Gerard Rennick, does a brilliant job for exposing this latest example of how completely out of touch and arrogant our public service has become. Have a listen. Not playing. No. It's much better when you hear it coming from him. However, basically what happened is Gerard Rennick asked him some 400 questions, which were put to this department. And the department complained that they didn't have time, or rather the Senate said, why haven't you answered the 400 questions we asked you? And he said, we haven't had time. Gerard Rennick points out that they have 2,000 staff. Over 3 weeks, that's one question per 5 person, once over 3 weeks. Really, could they not have answered the question? To which the guy kind of says, we're all very busy. Have a look at this org chart of this department. Here you go. We'll put it up on the screen. There you go. So the bloke at the top is saying, we're too busy. We can't answer the 400 questions in the time that you gave us. On that chart, you've got an entire net zero unit. You've got any number of people working on First Nations partnerships. You've got a people, culture and change unit. Sir Humphrey couldn't make this stuff up. You've got someone else entirely on First Nations languages and regional arts. Someone else on cultural policy, strategy and program support. There's someone else on collections and cultural heritage. On and on and on it goes. And then that's before you get to the other stuff. There's reducing surface transport emissions. And there's media reform, and on it goes. This is how your tax dollars are being spent. But no, they're too busy to answer the questions put to them by the Senate. Identity politics, woke garbage, in my opinion. While we can't afford to pay our electricity bills or fill up at the pump, they're complaining about, it's too arduous for us to answer these questions. Now, kudos to Senator Rennick for thinking what I was thinking and asking the most pertinent question of all, which was...
Can I get on notice the salaries of the top 50 staff in your department, please, and the average salary across your entire staff? Thank you.
It's in the what?
On notice.
When was the last...
So,
yeah, on notice. Yeah.
OK, so you're asking me to take that on notice. Noted.
So now you try running a small business or setting up a cafe or whatever, and you have to jump through far more hoops than you ever used to. This regulation, that regulation, often quite ridiculous rules and red tape, green tape, all that you want from authoritarian bodies like this mob, these 2,000 people setting these rules. People who never actually produce anything tangible and who, as often as not, stand in the way of other people, other Australians, being profitable and productive. What a joke. But here's the clincher. Guess how much this particular character, the head honcho, actually earns. His name, by the way, is Jim Betts, and his department's website informs us that Jim strives to be a champion for inclusivity and social justice. But I think we may have guessed that, Jim, that rainbow-coloured lanyard. Nice touch, very, very subtle. Have a look.
They can read out the top salaries of the department, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, so apart from the secretary, I'm happy to tell you what my salary is.
Actually, I am interested to know what your salary is.
Okay, because it's in the public domain. I'll have to check exactly what it is, because it's been adjusted recently. Secretaries are paid about, here we go, 928,340 total remuneration package.
How much am I paid, Rita? Thank you, Rita. 928,000. I forgot. Silly me. Close. Let's round it out to $1 million. Call it $1 million bucks. Let that sink in. Now, my father was a senior public servant in Canberra in the 1970s, and he explained to me then that public servants always earn substantially less than they would in the private sector. He always said, if you want to make money, go into the private sector, because the public sector, what with all the perks and that, they never pay you as much. And they don't take the risks that we do in the private sector. Well, clearly not anymore. There you go. $1 million a year and a huge department of 2,000 people who struggle to answer 400 questions from the Senate. Now, on to a politician who this week actually said something meaningful and extremely important. And believe it or not, he's a mad greenie, coal-hating lefty who also happens to be the Vice-Chancellor of Germany, Robert Habeck. Not normally my cup of tea, but he was spot on this week. Have a listen.
Die Gründung Israels war danach, nach dem Holocaust, das Schutzversprechen an die Jüdinnen und Juden, und Deutschland ist verpflichtet zu helfen, dass dieses Versprechen erfüllt werden kann. Das ist ein historisches Fundament dieser Republik.
No lack of moral clarity there, I'm pleased to say. Habeck is adamant that his nation's, that Germany's mission statement, that the entire basis of the Federal Republic of Germany is to ensure the safety of the Jewish people and to ensure that Jews never, ever again live in fear of being Jewish. Yet being afraid of being Jewish is precisely what is happening now on campuses, as we were saying, and in streets and on beaches around the Western world. In a moment, we'll chat to Dr. David Adler about what is happening here in Australia. Only a few people are brave enough to speak up, and good on them.
My Jewish sisters and brothers and I are on the receiving end of death threats from our peers. Undergraduates who have filed reports about these incidents have been left with no emotional support, no feedback, and no consequences for the perpetrators of these hateful actions. As a result of this inaction, there are Jewish students who do not feel physically safe on campus. And yet the unequivocal tone of the student body and, frankly, the administration prior to recent email statements is, no, this is not what anti-Semitism is. This is not what you are experiencing.
The Jews. Those words were said not here in Amsterdam, not on Broadway. Those words were said in Jerome Green Hall, Columbia's law school building. To be clear, I know this incident in fact occurred because it happened to me.
Now, should these students be scared? Yes, of course they should. What is going on around the world is utterly disgraceful. Let me be very clear, if you're struggling with your moral clarity. Israel removed itself from the Gaza Strip nearly 20 years ago in the name of giving up land for peace. That was the agreement. Land for peace. The people of the Gaza Strip then elected a terrorist organisation, and they've been stuck with them ever since. That terrorist organisation, Hamas, launched a brutal and bloodthirsty, barbaric pogrom against innocent Jewish families 4 weeks ago. The Israeli government must now eradicate Hamas. They have no choice. Evil must be wiped out. There is no other choice. That is moral clarity. The only reason you and I and our parents and grandparents didn't grow up under a Nazi or Japanese dictatorship is because the Allies approached defeating evil with the same moral clarity. But if you're struggling with your moral clarity and banging on about ceasefires and proportionality and all the rest of the lefty claptrap, then perhaps these comments from one of the heads of Hamas might give you pause for thought. October 7th, that's when Hamas raped, butchered and mutilated families, including putting a baby in an oven and raping its mother while the baby died. Well, this bloke, one of the leaders of Hamas, says that was not a one-off. Hamas intends for it to happen again and again and again.
إسرائيل لازم نأدبها وحنأدبها مرة ثانية وثالثة، ومش هذا حتكون طوفان الأقصى أول مرة، لا حتكون ثانية وثالثة ورابعة، لأنه إحنا لدينا إصرار ولدينا قرار ولدينا إمكانيات.
And here is just a tiny bit of what he's boasting about. One more tale of horror from that day, October 7th. And I'm sorry, it is distressing.
There was a little girl, around 8 or 9 years old, and they cut her head here, over here.
They cut it or they cut it off?
They just cut it all, no head. She was still breathing. She was just like shaking. And I performed a tourniquet, but it was her last breathing. Her last breathing. I wasn't there earlier to save her. She just lost so many blood for hours, all by herself. No one was near her even. She was so afraid. Her eyes, all by herself.
Should we take these murderous bastards seriously when they make their threats to obliterate Jews from the river to the sea? Damn right we should. Here's some crazed mullah declaring that defeating Israel is only the first step and that Spain is next.
بد أن نقول إن فلسطين من بحرها إلى نهرها أرض الإسلام وإن إسبانيا الأندلس أرض إسلام.
He then goes on, he wants the armies of Islam to seize back Andalusia and Spain and then move on and conquer Rome, and then when they've done that, conquer the rest of the world. No lack of what his religion perceives to be moral clarity is on his part. Now, that might sound like fantasy or hyperbole or whatever, until, of course, you see the footage that came out of London and other European cities during the week and last night. As one individual quipped on Twitter, we tend to think that Israel needs the help of Europe. Actually, it's more that Europe needs the help of Israel. What is clear, however, is that such vile aspirations, as expressed by so many, would mean for the women of the West. Those same women, in many instances, out there protesting against Israel and for Palestine. Don't say you weren't well warned. Yes, all those women back in the 50s and 60s, Rita's mum was one of them. Looking great back in the day, Rita, and then look what she would look like if she was there in Iran now. Meanwhile, over in Pakistan, the government there is expelling nearly 2 million Muslim refugees from Afghanistan by bulldozing them out of their homes. They have nowhere to go and they are terrified they will starve or freeze to death.
तकरीबन हम 12 साल से इधर रह रहे हैं ना हमको कोई नोटिस मिला है कुछ भी नहीं मिला है डायरेक्ट आ गया कहते खाली करो तो हम सर अभी किधर जाए वो हम भी सर्दी है बर्फ हो रहा है बिल्कुल जाने का इम्कान ही नहीं है ना हमारा उधर ज़मीन है
सर तकलीफ बाजार था वताइसु अबस रालो अफगानिस्तान
سمعنا نجاينا ونجايدا لرويتشنا لرو باران غريبان خالكي دي وشي واسمنا لرو لزانو پرایرانی موږ پاس بچو خروچو بچو بچان رو خلخانی لرو نکوسته د نباسته نم مزدوري سوکسته ده
So where is the universal outrage as Pakistan expels 2 million people, pushes them out, bulldozes their homes? Not a whisper of protest from the universities, no marches on the Opera House, nothing. There's your moral confusion writ loud and clear. But that moral confusion is nothing compared to the moral depravity of the United Nations, who this week made Iran one of the most murderous, tyrannical and evil nations on earth, the chair of the UN Human Rights Council Social Forum. Couldn't make this rubbish up. As I said last week, Australia and other Western nations must now quit the United Nations, stop all funding, withdraw immediately. It is untenable that we, you and me and our tax dollars are funding this thoroughly corrupt, perverse and sinister organisation. We must get out now. No ifs, no buts. At a time when the free world desperately, urgently needs to regain its sense of moral clarity, the UN foments the very opposite, moral depravity on steroids. Finally, here's a young man, Luau Ahmed, a Yemeni Arab, who, it strikes me, speaks with crystal clear moral clarity.
To those raising the Palestinian flag, where were you when ISIS was launched in the name of Islam and beheaded tens of thousands of Arabs in Libya, Syria, and Iraq? Why didn't you take it to the streets and raise their flags and condemn the terror and call for a ceasefire? Where were you when Arab dictators and terrorists killed hundreds of thousands of Arabs in Syria and Libya? Why didn't you take it to the streets then and raise the Syrian and Libyan flags and condemn the terror and call for a ceasefire? Where were you in the last decade when Saudi Arabia, backed by other Arab countries, killed and starved out more than 400,000 Yemenis, my country? I didn't see any of you take to the streets or raise the Yemeni flag or condemn the terror or call for a ceasefire. This calls for some self-reflection. When millions of Arabs are slaughtered by other Arabs, you say absolutely nothing. But when 7,000 Arabs are killed by Jews defending their right to exist, you revolt, you get angry, you raise the flag, you condemn the terror, you call for a ceasefire, you turn the world upside down. Why is that? Why were you so silent then, but so loud now? Can it be that you are finally raising a flag and creating chaos because you only hate that the perpetrators are Jews? Because you obviously don't care when millions of Arabs are killed by Arabs? Can it be that you storming the streets is just you venting out your hatred towards Jews? The same hatred that we learned by our mosques and schools? You often speak of numbers and proportionality, but by the rules of proportionality, you should not be raising the Palestinian flag unless there's another agenda at play. Jew hatred, or as I like to call it, hatred.
Moral clarity. I urge all Australians, whatever your politics, whatever your background, Australia is the most successful multiracial nation on earth, and it is our duty to make sure it stays that way. And that means that every Jewish child, every Jewish boy and girl, every Jewish family, every Jewish mum and dad and gran and grandpa feel safe and secure and free today of any threats, taunts or aggression in this their homeland. It is up to every one of us to make that a reality in every way we can. And it starts by refusing to have anything to do whatsoever with the current sinister and obnoxious anti-Semitic pro-Palestinian protests. If you know a Jewish person, give them a hug or a phone call today. Well, I'd reach across and give you a hug, David, but Rita's in the way. She'll give you a big hug. Dr. David... That's much better, exactly, much more preferable. Dr. David Adler, Australian Jewish Association. You've got a great article, front cover in The Spectator Australia this week, of which I'm the editor. You basically are saying, is Labor policy, so there's the cover, never again, you're challenging the Labor Party to cut that sign out, cut that yellow star out and wear it to show support for Jews. When are we going to see that from the Labor Party? You asked the question, is Labor policy complicit with Hamas? What do you mean?
Rowan, firstly, whoever designed that cover is a genius. It didn't come from me.
Sarah Dudley, yep.
The yellow star with the words never again, and the particular style of the font is similar to the style of the Hebrew script used in a Torah scroll. So it is a really, really powerful message. Everybody should see the cover, obviously, by the Spectator magazine as well. No conflict of interest here. But what we're saying about the Labor policy is that it has actually become not only just very hostile to Israel, it's become Hamas friendly. So when you see things like a whole series of decisions removing the limited recognition of Jerusalem as the capital, changing the way Australia votes at the UN, changing the terminology that's used in Australian diplomacy, so we're no longer speaking about disputed territories, we've now adopted the term occupied territories. Now, with the focus on Gaza, that is an obvious lie. You said in your editorial how Israel had withdrawn from Gaza in 2005. There is not a single Jew resident in Gaza. This would have to be the world's only occupation with no occupation. It's a bit like that old Clayton's drink, the drink you have when you're not having a drink. And then it goes on to something directly harmful. The Labor Party in the budget doubled the foreign aid to Palestinian territories from 35 to 70 million. And even since the 7th of October, when that horrific Hamas terrorism occurred, there have been further announcements of $10 plus $15 million in additional aid. Now, I understand, however well-intentioned that someone might be and want to help disadvantaged people. It's very naive. 100% of the distribution in Gaza is controlled by Hamas. If Australian aid turns up in whatever form, food, water, medicines, however it's delivered, if Hamas wants to take it for the purpose of replenishing its stock in the tunnels for its jihadists, it is taken. Australia...
We have no say in where that money ends up.
Exactly. So, a number of things. The local effect, you've also touched on. By changing Australia's official position, it is legitimising the hatred of Israel in Australia and pouring petrol on the flame of anti-Semitism. So we are very disappointed, and we're calling on the Labor government, if you don't want to stand actively with the traditional ally, Israel, at least stop the things that are doing harm. Stop sending money over there, resources over there, which are grabbed by Hamas.
You also mentioned, of course, Penny Wong, poster child of Quds Network, Quds News Network, I believe they're called,
Correct.
Who applauded her decision. I think we've got a photo of that. There she is. That's the Quds News Network, Hamas-affiliated or supported outfits, praising Penny Wong's decisions there as Foreign Minister, correct?
Absolutely correct. And I think this is the first time an Australian minister has been put on the poster of Hamas.
Let's hope it's the last.
Maybe you've got to think whether it's the correct policy or not if you're praised by Hamas.
Well, and it extends to us abstaining from certain UN votes, which have also been noticed. Now, there's also the semantics around, OK, we know a ceasefire is going to help Hamas, allow them to regroup. So now there are calls for what's been called a humanitarian pause. Now, I don't know how that differs from a ceasefire, but what's your response to that? What's your response to people who say, why can't we have a pause just so the innocent civilians can get some assistance or perhaps remove themselves from the line of fire?
The Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu was asked a very similar question at a press conference by a Channel 7 journalist, an Australian journalist. And he said that sort of proposal really has to be sent to Hamas. We recognise a safe zone in southeast Gaza. We want the civilians to gather there. Hamas is blocking them. Now, I saw in the last 24 hours a video of civilians who were trying to go to safety. They were killed by Hamas gunmen and their bodies are on the road. Hamas control still the bulk of what happens to the civilians. Every casualty is the responsibility of Hamas. The lack of humanitarian aid is the responsibility of Hamas. They have been given the world's greatest foreign aid per capita, and they've used it for tunnels and weapons, etc. Israel left a thriving greenhouse-based agricultural industry. There are videos of them digging up
it was a market garden. Gaza was a market garden.
To turn it into rockets. So, unfortunately, whether you call it ceasefire, humanitarian pause, it would be like when the US went after Al-Qaeda following 9/11, creating a humanitarian pause. The only thing that would happen is that Al-Qaeda would have regrouped.
James.
Yeah.
David, I just want to bring it back to local affairs here. I mean, we've seen over the last few weeks really hideous sorts of things. Just the other day, a display commemorating and reminding people of the hostages held by Hamas was taken down in Bondi Beach. 2 people have been apparently arrested and charged, which is finally good to see a bit of action from the New South Wales police on this. But how concerned are you that, you know, between messages from Labor and other things that have been happening in our society for the last 10, 20 years, that there is a group of people now who are not just, we want better treatment for the Palestinians, we want to see two-state, we want to see, fairness and justice, but are actually actively sympathetic to Hamas and everything that implies?
James, you're absolutely right. And there are now a couple of videos. It's on an organisation's website called Memory, MEMRI TV, which monitors extremist Islam. 2 Australian hate preachers, one in Bankstown from, I think it's the Al Medina Dawa Centre, that is actually expressing support for 3 prescribed terrorist organisations, Hamas, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that these are the flags of Islam, he says, and praising jihad. How that is not inciting violence in breach of our legislation, I don't know. I'm aware that the videos have been referred to Home Affairs and New South Wales Counter-Terrorism Police. It's a real risk, and it plays out on the ground. We see on the university campuses not just messages say that we're sympathetic with the casualties, the civilians, but grossly ugly anti-Semitic messages. We've had reports of Jewish students chased at the University of Melbourne and Sydney, feeling unsafe to be on campus, getting permission to do exams and studies from home.
Monash is actually allowing Jewish students to have their exams in a safe space. They're segregating Jewish students or allowing them to do their exams online because of these issues. So, I mean, that's just incredible in 2023.
Dr. David Adler, thanks so much for coming on and speaking about all that. Very distressing times for many people, I know. Your organisation does a great job. Keep up the great work. Dr. David Adler.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. After the break, we'll go over to New Zealand to find out a little bit about the treaty there, plus James's donkey vote in a tick. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the program. James Morrow here, as always, with Rowan Dean and Rita Panahi. And hey, let's check out how things are going in the thriving multicultural mosaic of New York City, which is home to one of America's biggest Jewish populations and also welcomes all kinds to come together in peace and love and harmony. Why, you can just feel the tolerance on this New York City street where, yes, a taxi driver is very tolerantly reaching out of his cab to grab an Israeli flag, presumably put there to show support for the Jewish people in the wake of Hamas's massacre attacks, and with love and peace and joy in his heart, the taxi driver throws it to the ground. Charming. And here's some more. This is vision that has just emerged of a shop in Manhattan being set upon by pro-Palestine and, let's be frank, by what we mean here, Hamas-sympathizing demonstrators. Attacking Jewish shops. I don't know, where have I seen that before? I don't know, but I don't like it. But I did especially like the guy who there wrapped their whole heads up in those keffiyeh scarves in imitation of Palestinian terrorists. This sort of beautiful tolerance is also being seen in the classrooms of New York's higher education sector. This week, 30 students walked out of a lecture being given by none other than Hillary Clinton to protest that their names had been put up on a truck revealing them, oh dear, as having signed an anti-Israel letter that sought to blame the Jews for the violence. And these students said, quote, "The weight of responsibility for the war and casualties undeniably lies with the Israeli extremist government and other Western governments, including the U.S., which fund and staunchly support Israeli aggression, apartheid, and settler colonization," unquote. Sorry, kids. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and the irony of Ivy League kids using short skirts cause rape arguments is not lost on any of us. But while all the street and classroom level stupidity plays out, I am far more concerned that there are bigger threats in the offing, the result of a toxic combination of elite anti-Semitism and a weak, toxically weak Biden administration. As I reported on the U.S. Report on Friday night, and make sure you tune in every week at 8 p.m., in the fiscal year 2023, some 163 people were arrested trying to cross the southern border who were on terror watch lists. And that's just the ones we know about. And we also know that at least one person was let go who, according to a federal inspector general report, should have been stopped because systems had unfortunately prevented him being identified again as a possible terrorist person of interest. So, great work there. But all of this makes the story more chilling when you look at this. Meet Sohaib Abayush. He was arrested, he's a Jordanian national, recently by federal authorities in Houston on firearms charges. And guess what? He's in the United States illegally, with CNN reporting delicately that he is in the country on a quote-unquote expired non-immigrant visa, unquote. Yeah, he's there illegally. Apparently, this charming fellow, allegedly, had spoken about martyrdom, had been communicating with people who, quote, shared a radical mindset and was training with weapons to, quote, possibly commit an attack. So where is, we gotta ask, Joe Biden in all of this? Well, according to the official White House schedule, the U.S. president has no official event scheduled this weekend. Perhaps he just wanted a nice weekend at home watching Sky News Australia. But before he went off to the beach for, by the way, the third weekend in a row, the president claimed that the very open border that allowed Abayush into the country is actually being enforced and that there's no problem at all.
Enforcing our immigration laws in humane and effective ways that deters dangerous, irregular migration and disrupts traffickers.
Did you get all that? He even suggested that the very policies that are straining America's multicultural tolerance to the limit are actually working.
Working together to stabilize migrant populations, including making sure the communities that are welcoming migrants and refugees can afford to welcome them and afford to care for them.
Whatever, Joe. Later, it was onto the plane, no questions answered, and short stares, please, for that third consecutive weekend at the beach. Now, here's the thing. Don't think the world is not paying attention to this. Here's the president of the Dominican Republic throwing a bit of shade on the president, announcing the next location for the Summit of the Americas.
Mr. President, we look forward to welcoming you soon to the Dominican Republic at the next Summit of the Americas in 2025. And that summit will be in Punta Cana, so you have time to be on the beach.
So you'll have time to be at the beach. Mr. President, if your friends are noticing and saying this and how much time you are spending at the beach, what about your enemies?
Great stuff, James. Thank you. Well, our next guest is the author of a book, Fraud, Plunder, Treason, and Our Treaty, which delves deep into the treaty industry within New Zealand to expose its racket of money, power grabs, and what he believes is corruption. Joining us from Auckland is the author of the book, Chris Newman. Chris, great to see you. You had me at fraud, treaties. It sounds like the lash of the rum and all of that sort of stuff. Tell us why you think... tell us briefly about the Treaty of Waitangi. What's its background and how has it played out over recent years?
Well, thank you, and welcome to New Zealand and our whole story here, which is a little bit complicated. In 1840, the chiefs and tribes had really begged the British Crown to give them a treaty because the previous 3 decades they'd been on a rampage, an arms race, where they'd slaughtered somewhere between 30 and 40% of their own kind and eaten them at a series of military engagements where there was only Maori on Maori using muskets purchased in Sydney. And they were so desperately tangled in this racket of murder, they call it utu. Tribal law says utu, payback. They couldn't stop it. It was like a runaway snowball. They were inviting the British to come in and help bring peace to the country with British common law, and the whole idea of modernity was about to begin. The missionaries who had been working here for 30 years were very keen to protect the survivors of this self-inflicted misery and to bring them to a state of rest. And because Maori are very intelligent people in those days anyway, they saw the benefits. So they signed away their sovereignty, as it were, their chiefly sovereignty, to accept the higher sovereignty of British common law, which, of course... So
I'll just stop you there. So the Maori, there were various tribes who signed the treaty with the English, with the Crown, and who else? Now, and I'll just also pick you up. Obviously, there are many very intelligent Maori to this day, Chris, but I take your point that the signing of the treaty was an intelligent act because it brought peace. So you're saying it brought peace to the warring tribes back in the mid-1800s, and that was the purpose of it. The purpose of it was to bring peace to warring tribes. Okay, so fast forward to the 1970s, and the treaty was then looked at again. So what happened then?
Well, the treaty in 1840 was between 3 parties, the Queen, the chiefs and tribes, and all the people in New Zealand. In 1975, a very clever parliamentarian named Matthew Rata passed a document into the Parliament as if it were the treaty, but it was neither a draft nor a translation. It was a report written by one James Freeman, and he pretended it was the treaty. But the treaty is in Maori, not English. So this fake English document was passed as a fraud. So the Parliament since 1975 has been in a fraud because it's passed a fake document. And in that document, it said that the lands and estates and forests and fisheries, the chiefs and tribes had very special rights to those, and that it all implied that it was just the Queen and the chiefs. The Queen and the Maori. So is this how we got to the people?
So is this how we got to the situation today of the 3 waters, where the water rights are now being taken out of councils and handed back to different tribes? So is that? So you talk about fraud, you talk about plunder. and treaty.
Yep.
So what are the today? Because we'll run out of time shortly. What are the ramifications today of this water regulation and how it relates to the Treaty of Waitangi?
It's an asset grab. It's a fanciful idea that all the chiefs and tribes were in a contract with the Queen. But modern Maori are mixed blood. They're all mixed race people. So they aren't chiefs and tribes. In fact, I think the chiefs and tribes would chastise heavily their descendants of mixed blood who are trying to undo all the unity, all the marriages and so on. It sort of has echoes of The Voice where, you know, you had your constitution was under threat by people with an agenda who are busy running the, you know, race politics into the public sphere and using that as a cloak for their agenda. We had the same thing in New Zealand where the race-related politics under, I call it Maorification, behind it, there's a whole lot of guys who are making big money out of this. So in New Zealand, billions of dollars have been transferred that belong to the people of New Zealand into the hands of corporate, what we call corporate iwi, which is tribal leaders, lawyers, accountants, social workers, a whole range of people who feed off the body of the Commonwealth of the people, and they don't have any mandate. There's no mandate. There's no approval. In fact, when these things are put to the vote, like your voice, they collapse. Recently in Auckland City... Oh, sorry, yes?
No, that's fascinating. So, Chris, we've got to leave it there. So, basically, your book, Fraud, Plunder, Treason and Our Treaty, it's fascinating because it does look at what we avoided here in Australia by voting no to The Voice. There is an entire kind of undemocratic approach to property rights, water rights and so on, going to big organisations, which I think people should read your book. Fascinating story, particularly the history there. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on Outsiders Today. Still to come, cold out there, really cold in Sydney today. It's bucketing down. Where's Tim Flannery when you need him? Ice Age Watch in a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders Weather and the Skeptics Ice Age Watch, the show that casts a skeptical eye over the more alarmist aspects of the global warming cult and views the endless extremist doom-mongering of our kids as a modern-day version of Halloween. We scare the kiddies witless about global boiling and then trick them with a grab bag of shiny, sugar-coated renewables, lollies and virtue-signalling treats to make them feel good again. How spooky. Indeed, here are some of my favourite climate ghouls. Here's frozen Al Gore, the inconvenient truth-teller himself. And of course, who can forget Greta, the queen of the teenage creepy climate zombies. And scariest of all, this freak in a Tim Flannery mask. Even the rain that falls won't fill our rivers or our dams. Ooh, scary stuff. But how strange, in an era of unprecedented global boiling, that is even the Secretary General of the United Nations wetting his pants. Yes, that's him there wading into the shallows. Chicago just endured a top 5 coldest Halloween on record, according to the climate skeptic website Electroverse. While elsewhere, Dickinson, North Dakota, posted a record-setting -19 degrees Celsius. Lawton, Oklahoma, broke a record, as did Carbondale, Illinois. Quote, in terms of late October, early November Arctic blast, I'm astounded by the historical scale of the record lows. Completely underestimated the intensity of the cold during El Nino, posted one meteorologist on X. Bet he did. Furthermore, Halloween, October the 31st, 2023, is now the snowiest October day ever recorded in Muskegon. And October 2023 is now the city's snowiest month of October, breaking a record set well over a century ago in 1910. Likewise, in Wisconsin, Eau Claire had its Streets and Fleets division ploughing the roads to clear record-breaking Halloween snow. Quote, ever since the point of record, which goes back to the late 1800s, we've only had We've only had measurable snow 3 times prior to today, said local meteorologist Mike D'Andrea. Quote, our previous record was set back in 1932. That's in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, where winter is approaching, but what about in the Southern Hemisphere, where summer is approaching? Well, a late-season polar blast has gripped southern Africa of late. According to News24.com, temperatures in some areas plunged 20 degrees Celsius in 24 hours. The mountains of Lesotho are freezing and rare snow is falling. Likewise, residents in some parts of the Eastern Cape, Free State and KwaZulu-Natal woke up to snow covering nearby mountains and breathtaking scenes as their gardens matched the snow-tipped peaks of distant mountains. Barkly East, Elliot and parts of Matatiele have been turned into a winter wonderland. Snow has capped the Sneyberg, Winterberg and the Drakensberg mountains. And finally, October was an anomalously cold month across Antarctica, with averages ranging from -1 degree Celsius to -1.9 below the multi-decadal norm. The freeze has now spilt into November too. On November the 1st, the French-Italian research facility Concordia posted a low of -60.4 degrees Celsius, which isn't far off the station's record monthly minimum of -62.2 degrees Celsius set on November 2nd, 2006. And here, if you're wondering what it is, it's a picture of noodles at Concordia at -60 degrees, posted 5 years ago. Happy Halloween. Imagine, most people think hell is hot, but as the Scandinavians always knew, there's nothing more hellish than the cold. Hell is being in the chiller because it's the cold, not the warmth, that is the real killer, as Michael Jackson warned us in Thriller.
And though you fight to stay alive, your body starts to shiver, for no mere mortal can resist the evil of the Thriller.
Hyperbole, extreme exaggeration. Well, Obama, who we know is the real president of the US, what's he been up to, Rita?
Well, yes, this is the man who was behind the Iranian deal, the man who enriched and emboldened the Iranian regime that funds Hamas. He's got some thoughts about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and he thinks we're all complicit to some degree.
What Hamas did was horrific, and there's no justification for it. And what is also true is that the occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable.
What is also true, it's sort of a way of saying but, James, isn't it, without saying
well,
but.
It's a way of saying but, the thing that everybody has to remember about this is that what's happening right now in the White House is essentially Barack Obama's third term. So much of the foreign policy establishment are all the people who worked for Barack Obama. They helped do the Iran deal. They did the Arab Spring. You remember what a fantastic disaster that was. Barack Obama has said that he would love to just sit behind the scenes and get the briefings and tell people what to do and say. It's clear that Barack Obama is partially responsible for what's going on here now. Even if he's not directly controlling Joe Biden, his people are in there. This is the Obama style of governance we're seeing. And this moral relativism, we're all a bit guilty. Everyone's no, that's wrong.
Complicit.
Hamas is the bad guys, Barack Obama. I hate to tell you, as are your buddies in Iran.
Absolutely. Now, hyperbole, extreme exaggeration. Bruce Pascoe seems to have been a bit upset by The Voice, James. What happened here?
Oh, poor Bruce Pascoe. Well, he said that he's done a very long piece. I mean, you can see it there on the screen. And everybody should go actually look at the Guardian website, because I never advise that. But this is one of the most entertaining things you get to read. And among other things, he says that since the no vote, he says, Rita and Rowan, the sunshine is sour now.
Sour? The sunshine is sour.
How can heat be sour?
The sunshine is sour.
We'll cover that nice next week.
I love how the headline also says the Voice result means Australians are hiding the facts of our history. And
nice one, Bruce. Nice one, Bruce.
Speak about that.
Now, we've also had some fascinating lefty lunacy this week where 80 bird species will be renamed. Why? To break links with slavery and racism. Better tell Paul McCartney that's blackbird gone for one. What's the story about, James?
Well, apparently there's all of these birds, 70 or 80 of them, that are, they're getting the chop, not being sent to the wind farm, but rather their names are getting the chop. Birds like the Wilson snipe and the Hammond flycatcher, because apparently they're named after people who, yes, I'm sorry, Rita, the Hammond flycatcher were named after people who had bad opinions once upon a time.
Wow.
And they were white.
Well, I've always suspected birds were racist, and this just
there
proves
you go.
it.
Now, just before we go, very quickly,
birds.
Victorian firefighters there, Fire Rescue Victoria. They want to put out fires, but those who are unvaccinated still are not allowed to. What a joke, Victoria, seriously. That's it for Outsiders. We will see you next Sunday when we'll have everything working perfectly, even my opening to Ice Age Watch, which I shall learn off by heart, Rita. What do you reckon?
I need you to learn every word of those 3,000 words in sequence.
As well as the song.
And they'll sing the song as well. That's it for Outsiders. We'll see you next Sunday. Watch Rita and James during the week. See ya.